Hey everyone, so I'm going to be doing a little bit of a mini series on how to work with floche. I've been talking about floche for a little while now. I've been working with it for about 2 years, but lately I've been doing these floche braids. So this is going to get over. I've got one that is designed to go with ducks. You can see I've got 2 different yellows, I've got 3 different blues, and the idea with the 2 different yellows is like ducks are so great, right, for baby boys, girls, all that sort of stuff, and especially for little boys. You might want to do a duck motif for like a newborn boy. Well, I think that would be, I mean, it's so new to you, but I think newborn would be more of this light pale yellow, and then like an older boy would be this, more of like a bolder yellow. It's not a bold yellow, but it's just, they're so pretty, such pretty colors. And same thing with the blue. Like you might want to do a lighter blue for newborns, and then one of the more deeper blues for an older boy. The difference between the two deeper blues is one is more of like neutral, and one has a very, very slight purple undertone to it. So depending on what you're putting it on, like what fabric or whatever, what other colors you're mixing it with, you might want to go with one versus the other. The braid also has 2 different oranges. Again, one is a lighter orange and one is a darker orange. And finally, last but not least, I've got some black and some white in here, and then the black is the idea for the little eye, and the white is like, well, just why not? There's enough colors in there as it is. You could put some French knots around the motif, some granados. It's just, well, just threw it in there. So I have this motif. This is my little ducking around, or getting my ducks in a row. Sorry, not ducking around, getting my ducks in a row motif. This is on my website for an instant download. And let's get started. So when you get a floche braid, all you do to get a color out, and I do separate the colors, so like you don't have to worry. It's like, okay, if I picked on the left side, that's all separate, different blues and different colors than on the right side. You see what I'm saying? So you just pick a strand. We're going to do, let's do more of the medium blue. And so what you do is you just pick whatever color you want, and you simply pull it out, and it comes out without any issues. So now you can get on to using your floche. I am going to just put a small little knot in the bottom, and I'm going to be doing some shadow work embroidery. This motif you could do like you could just outline the shapes, do like a backwards running stitch, however you call that, backwards running stitch. It's early. You could do that, or you could do shadow work embroidery. You could do a satin stitch mixing it in. You could just do some, what do they call it when you just do straight stitches and you fill in the, anyway, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I'm going to show you how to do it with shadow work embroidery. I've actually had this tutorial on my channel for a while ago, but I thought it'd be fun to do a fresher version, especially with these floche braids. So you can see I came up on one of the corners, and I am going to be doing, like I said, shadow work embroidery. The whole idea of shadow work embroidery, I have a video that goes over how to shadow work embroider any shape, and you will see in that the whole idea of shadow work embroidery is you are to find the rectangle within all of the shapes. And so you can kind of, squint your eyes and see how every shape can morph into a rectangle. And from there, you're going to pick the long sides of that rectangle and go back and forth on those long sides, doing the backwards running stitch until you have her filled in. And I think shadow work embroidery, it is so cool. It looks very sharp, right? It looks like almost magical. Like, how did you fill it in and all that sort of stuff, especially if people to people who don't do embroidery work. It's just so cool. So you can see I'm just going back and forth, and that's the idea of this whole thing. The smaller you make your stitches, there's sort of a balance, because the smaller you make your stitches, the more back and forth you're going to have, so the more filled in of a look you're going to have. But I would caution you, I mean, it's so new to you, but I would caution you on making your stitches too small, because then you get into like this sort of, if they're super, super small, then it can just be like, what I'm trying to say, the stitches almost kind of disappear because you have one going up and down, you know what I mean? Like, it almost stops and starts when the next one stops and starts, and so you lose kind of the definition of each stitch. I don't know if I'm explaining that well or not. So my stitches are about, they're not quite 1/8 of an inch. This is so relaxing. I used to not enjoy handwork. Way back in high school, I would try to do everything on the machine. I would try to make it work and get it all done, and I wouldn't baste anything, and I wouldn't do this, and I wouldn't do, I was like, no, I can just do it all on the machine, and it'll be fine. And it's like, I love the handwork. I love it. So relaxing. And you can see how this is just sort of filling in, and you can see like this little blue shading we have going on here. Isn't that cool? So I traced this, I kind of skipped over that part, didn't I? I traced this with the Friction Heat Activated pen. I've been loving that pen for a number of years. I had a friend, dear friend of mine not too long ago, ask me, and I need to follow up with her about it, I keep saying that, but she ran into some issues with, she used it, and I've discovered that there's 2 versions of it. I've discovered that, doesn't really make sense to me, but I've discovered there's the one with the big honking cap, okay, this one here. I discovered there's that one, and it comes in a variety of colors and all that sort of stuff. And then I've discovered there's one with a smaller cap. It's a smaller pin all over. And I had an issue. I was marking actually the cut garden dress, Audrey's birthday dress, and I marked the hem on it. And I've never had an issue with the one with the big cap coming out. But I marked it, like I said, with the small one. And there's a bit of a little shadow to it, so I need to take some like Amodex, whatever how you pronounce that, and see if I can get the little shadow to come out. I've never had that issue with the like I said, with the big pen, but that stitch is a little too big, isn't it? Let's take that guy out. So sometimes that happens, and we can just take that out and go again. That noise you hear in the background is my husband sanding down our front door. So we added on to the front of our home about a year, not quite a year ago, coming up on a year. And it's been like, we wanted to get done before Daisy was born, and we got fairly close, but it did not get all the way done. So we've been slowly but surely putting the, final stuff. So the other day I went to go paint the new front door. Well, then Audrey was outside, and for whatever reason she stuck her hand in the wet paint, okay? So now we have a little bit of a situation we're trying to sand out. Kids, have kids, they said, right? It would be fun, they said. And you can see it, I'm a little bit like, as far as being, you kind of want to keep your stitches in line, and so now I've got this curve that's longer. This is a longer distance than the inside curve, so what needs to happen is I need to make shorter stitches on the inside curve, since that's the one with the least distance, and make slightly larger stitches on the outside so I can kind of keep them together. You know what I mean? And I'm coming to the end of this piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie off, and to do this I'm going to go through, go back in my work and go through this little thing, these 2 little pieces, strands of floche. I'm going to go through them. Oops, my floche came on my needle. So I'm going to do that until I create a loop. Y'all know the drill. I'm going to go through that loop. You can just go through it once. You can go through it twice. Then I'm going to send my whole, I'm going to send it all the way through a bunch of those. And, where's my trimmers? There they are. And then I can trim off. And that's how I had my tail. And you can see actually in the beginning, here's my tail, and I just stick the beginning tail underneath where those stitches are being formed. That way it gets caught too. And it's just a much cleaner of a look because there's no tails like flipping this way and that way. So it's cleaner on the back side, and you don't see those little tails on the front side. So let's get another thing of floche. Once again, I'm going to tie it twice, like that. Pull her tight. I am so excited to be doing these floche videos for y'all. I think that if you are, okay, sorry. Before I go, I'm just going to show you how I hide that tail. So I'm going to pull the knot through, and then you can see my tail is now under, oh, can you see that? So my tail is now under this area right here. What was I saying? Oh yeah, I'm so excited to be doing these floche videos. Like I said, I've been using floche, working with floche for about 2 years. I absolutely love it. It's, as I refer to it, it's the older sophisticated sister of floss. So there's nothing wrong with floche, but oh, there's everything right with floche. It's just delicious. So we can continue with our embroidery. And you notice I'm using a hoop. First, I have a video, another video that shows you, well, I've got two. So I've got one that shows you how to wrap your hoop, which is something that is just an absolute game changer. And I have another video that shows how to get your fabric super taut in your hoop. And with very few exceptions, like if your fabric has a little bit of like stretch to it, like say wool or something, you may not want to get it super taut, but any of your 100% cottons and all that stuff, you want to get all those suckers taut, like a drum is what people will say. And having it super taut is just a game changer with your stitches. I used to think that having it super taut led to the deformation, the little like bubbles, if you will, but really what the bubbles are is your finger. So you do not want to put your finger, like you don't want to poke it up on the hoop, or if you're doing if you're holding your fabric in your hand, you don't want to same thing, you don't want to poke your finger through. It'll have deformations of your fabric, and it will just have like these little bubbles all over your fabric wherever that finger poked its way up. It's not exactly an attractive look, so it's something to try to avoid. And you can see I'm finishing up this little, it's like this little water wave that the duck's sitting on. We used to have ducks in Savannah. They're really a neat thing. I think they are overall better than chickens. We also used to have chickens back when we lived in Florida. Well, we had them a little bit in Savannah too. And chickens, they can get to be mean. At least the ones that we had. There's the whole pecking order. We had Rhode Island Reds, and I think we had a couple other ones, but they can be a little mean, and the ducks are just kind of cool. They just sort of quack around your property the whole time, and the only thing that I think is a little better on chickens than ducks, and you're comparing them, is that ducks are a bit messy because they need water, so they splash around in water and all that stuff, and they can get to be a bit messy. But they're so cool, like they just kind of quack around and throughout your property, and they go to the same place, same with chickens, to sleep that night. And so we would hear them in the evenings quack, 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 back to their little coop to go sleep. So neat. Daisy is out there in her jumper helping her daddy with the front door situation. So that's what you're hearing. Her jump around. She has the hiccups. So I am now almost done with this wave. I'm going to take, I think, one more stitch. Maybe it'll be 2 more stitches. Yeah, I think I'm going to do 1 stitch here, and that will be the last stitch on this side of the curve, and then I'm going to go over and do one stitch on this side of the curve. Isn't that cool? You can have a little wave now. How fun is that? And floche, when you compare it to floss, it's a little bit thicker than the floss is. Now the floss, you can use, you know, 1 strand, 2 strands, 3 strands. I've done shadow work embroidery with it. It's so easy to use with all that goodness. Floche, I suppose you could use more than 1 strand, but then really your stitches on top would be thicker, and I don't think that would be the most attractive look. So floche, 2 things. One, it's the 1 strand is thicker than 1 strand of floss, but like I said, you could double up on your floss, and that's not a huge thing. But because it's a soft fiber and it's like lightly twisted together, it sort of has this spreadability to it. So especially with shadow work embroidery where you're trying to get that coverage underneath, it does a fabulous job at spreading out and giving the coverage for shadow work embroidery. I just think it's just such lovely stuff. I've done a number of motifs now with it, and I love it. And the colors and the sheen, and it's so fun. I'm going to continue with this wave, and I will come back for the duck. Alright, so now we've done all of our blue waves, and we can move on to the duck. So similarly to the blue waves, it's the whole find a rectangle thing. So you can see as the duck goes up, you know, we're going to have we're going to treat those as the long sides of the rectangle is what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to start on one side of the duck and make my first little stitch over here. And on the back side, again, I am holding that. Maybe you can see it between, like, through the fabric, kind of. And I'm holding my thumb there just lightly. I don't want to deform, you know, having deformation in my fabric, but I'm lightly holding it there. That way, when this stitch comes up, it can catch the tail, and my tail will be hidden underneath the smocking, or not the smocking, the back and forth of the shadow work. And it's just one of those little small details, devil's in the details as they say, and it makes your work a lot neater. So it's something that once you get into hiding your tails, there's no going back. You're constantly like, where can I hide this tail? What can I do here? And yada yada, because you want to hide all those little tails, so your work will be neater. And this is going to be the same sort of process as the waves, going back and forth to fill in this little duck. I'm not going to worry about his little wing yet. I'm going to come back and do like a little stem stitch on the wing after we've done all of the shadow work. So I'm just going to go up. So I mentioned earlier, and I think I might have gotten sidetracked with these pins, but these are the 2 pins that I was talking about. And you can see one is like way bigger physically than the other one. And I would have thought they were the same exact ink, or whatever it is inside of it. I would have thought it's the same makeup. I'm not sure if it is or not. I've been using the one with the big cap for a number of years. It's always come out. It might leave a tiny bit of you know, that little ghosting mark behind. And I actually have a video on how to get that away. I test out ammo decks as well as this other Moschenbox or something like that. It's German, and both of those, you can watch the video, but both of those work fairly well at getting out the ghost marks. For some reason with the cut work thing though, like I said, I've never really had any issues with the big cap. Maybe a little bit here and there, but I love it anyways, or I love it still. The small one though, I was doing the cut work dress, and I just marked where the hem was going to go as like just a construction thing, and when I went to iron that, it left like a really big ghost mark, and I really need to sit down and try to use the ammo decks and get the ghost mark out. And I think that might be the one that my friend used, because she was like, I had issues with it. I need to verify. Anywho, I like them both. I use them for different reasons. I use the smaller one, like especially buttonholes, because the buttonhole, like you're gonna have thread over all of it, so you're not gonna see, even if there's a big old ghost mark left behind, you're not gonna see any of it, even if it's white on white. So I've used that, and it's no big deal. The small one is like a fourth of the price of the big one, so definitely a little bit of a savings there. So I'm just gonna put my thread, hiding that tail, sorry, that tail, not the thread. I'm just gonna feed it back through onto this side because that's where I left off, and we are going to continue this little duck, going back and forth. So now I've got into the little tail of the duck, so I'm going to redefine my rectangle between like this and that, so I can fill in the tail. You can see I'm full on this side of the duck. So here's how I'm going to do the tail. And the tail has these little tiny curves to it, these little feathers, little tail feathers. And with the little tiny curves, it's best to reduce that stitch length down quite a bit. I need to do a video on the whole tangent to the curve and all of that, and get a really good visual for you guys who struggle going around curves and making them smooth and fluid. It's all about tangent, the tangent to the curve, and really it goes back to calculus, all those classes where, the math classes where your teacher would say, oh, you're going to use this, and you're like, when am I ever going to use, math and stuff. This is concepts right here that take you back and show you that you really do use math in your everyday life. Even if you're not putting pen to paper and doing like algebra or nothing, it's the concepts that really stick with you. So I'm just finishing up. I've kind of gotten the coverage, so now I'm just doing the backwards running stitch just to fill in the outline. And then the little outline is filled in for that. So I'm going to put my needle through like this. And send it off this way. And I'm just going to start doing the backwards running stitch to do the outline on the back of the duck. I sort of have the coverage going up. I made this motif for Henry when he was around 3 or 4 months old, and have some sweet little photos of him in it. I think ducks are just so sweet. Like I said, it could be sweet for boys, it can also be sweet for girls. You can add like little pink bows to the duck or something, or just accent the garment with little bits of pink, and it's just super sweet. Alright, so I've gotten the back outline done, and I'm about to the end of this piece of floche, so I'm just going to tie her off. Now this is a situation where I don't have a ton of, it's not really like a good spot to, send my needle this way and tie it that way, so I'm just going to go through some of my stitches and tie it off that way, and then for the tail, I'm going to take this and work it through the stitches. Same sort of idea, just a little bit different way of doing it since it's not the setup that I had before. Oh, my words sometimes. Once again, I'm going to put this whole thing under all of those threads so I can hide my tail. And I'm going to let's start on this side, shall we? Should we start on that side? Maybe we should start on this side. And Daisy just woke up. So, the head is going to be the same sort of idea, going back and forth between one side to the other side, doing that backwards running stitch. And we're going to keep our stitches a little bit on the smaller side because we are, the head is a curve. So we want to make a nice smooth head with going around the curves, nice smooth curves, and like I just said, that's how you do it, is you keep your stitches on the smaller side of life. So now we've got into this beak, and I'm not going to do I'm just going to skip over the beak. So here's my last stitch below the beak. I'm going to go over to the other side to do that. And then I'm going to head over to above the beak. And if I'm probably going to have an area where like there's a gap in the coverage on the other side of like the yellow. And for that I can just come back and weave my threads once I have done the beak. The beak will give me threads to weave into, and I will show you what I mean when we get there. So we are almost done with this little head. We're coming up to the top of the head. And now I'm at, like, my coverage is good for the top of the head. So I'm just going to do the backwards running stitch to finish the outline. If you're curious what fabric I'm using, this is some white Imperial Batiste. I've talked about how I love Imperial Batiste on my channel a number of times. It's a great affordable fabric. It does have a little bit of sheerness to it, so you can do things like shadow work embroidery, and it looks beautiful. It's affordable because it's like $6.50 for 60-inch wide, so you can do a lot 60-inch wide with babies. Or even for yourself. Back before I was sewing, before I had little ones, I made myself a bunch of things out of Imperial Batiste. It's a lovely cotton polyester blend. It doesn't wrinkle as easily as cotton, and it's just like, I remember I had this pink dress with some French knots on it that was out of pink Imperial Batiste, and then it was lined with white Imperial Batiste, and I wore that sucker out. I loved that dress. I wonder what happened to it. Who knows? But yeah, I loved that dress. It was such a sweet embroidery motif too, of like the French knots that were just in this little bit of a swoop thing. Anywho, so we have basically done our duck, except for the wing. And the wing I'm going to wait, because that's going to be the same piece of floche to do the wing and to fill in this little coverage. So I'm going to move on then to the beak. And like I said, with this braid, you've got two different orangey colors. You can see this is the part of the braid that's the orangey color. You've got this deeper orange as well as a lighter orange. Just whatever floats your boat, it's sewing, you do you, all of that goodness. So I'm going to separate the beak into two sections, two rectangles if you will. The bottom part of the beak is going to go in a hurry because it's so small. And we're just going to do from one side to the other side. I mean, it's kind of more or less a triangle, right? So you just go from one side to the other side, and then you just do an outline for the bottom of the beak, since the two sides get you the coverage, and then the third side of that triangle, you just do an outline to fill her in. See, here I am almost done with the bottom of this beak. I've got one more stitch to do, and there it is. Now we're going to do the top of the beak. It's a similar idea. I'm going to start here, again taking little stitches. Go on to this side. And now we're left with this side of the beak. I've already done the coverage with these two legs. So once again, same thing with the bottom of the beak. I'm just going to fill in with the outline, right? Not worried about coverage anymore on the back side. Again, the beak, this has a little bit of a curve, so once again, tiny stitches around a curve to make it look nice. And here we go. Here's our last stitch, meeting up with the top of the head. So there's our beak. Now, these stitches that we've just created, that's going to give us something to feed the yellow into. So let's finish up this duck. You can see that's where we're going to feed, so we have coverage underneath that part of the head. So let me just go through some of these threads. And you can see, like, I used about, what, not even half of that piece of floche. Oh, let me hide the tail. Hold on. Alright, so let's grab the yellow and finish up the body of this duck. I'm first going to start doing the stem stitch. I think this is the stem. The stem and the outline, I honestly get them backwards in my mind. One is when you bring the thread below, one's when you bring the thread above. I've googled it a million times. I cannot keep it straight in my mind. They're the same thing. Like I said, one's below, one's above. This instance, we're going to keep the thread below, and then you make your new stitch. You can see I'm making my new stitch. Pulling her tight, keep it below, make the new stitch somewhere in between here. And basically, like, how I think of it is that you want to keep your thread. See how I'm keeping it to this side? That's because that's the way the curve goes. If I kept it to this side, the curve would just sort of collapse on itself. But this way, each stitch is providing structure for the next stitch. Does that make sense? That way the stitches, like a, you know, they don't just collapse. That's how I remember which way to do it. And you can see it kind of gives this lovely little, like a swirl effect, if you will, where each stitch is resting on the previous stitch and again keeping that from collapsing. Daisy has woken up from her nap a little while ago. Her daddy is trying to entertain her. I'm not sure how long it's going to last. That's exciting. She says no. Alright, so we are at our last stitch, and to keep this stitch from collapsing, I'm just going to take my needle like I was, as if I was going to make another stitch, right? And then just send my needle onto the other side of that stitch. And there we have our little wing. So we can flip it over, and you can see that I actually have a little bit of gap in coverage here and here as well. So we can fix that pretty easily. You just send your needle and you use the existing stitches as a framework to kind of weave in some more coverage. It's no big deal. You see how that just filled that in right like that? And again, we can send it this way to fill in some more. And now we can do the same sort of idea to fill in this portion of the head. And that's what I was saying before, that we needed the stitches from the beak as like some structure, some framework to be able to weave. Let's take this little area of the beak and then let's weave that through these stitches over here. Go back to the beak, another little section of that. All of these stitches stay on the underneath, so you're not going to see these stitches. I mean, they're not even stitches, right? It's just weaving, weaving into the current, like the existing stitches. You're just weaving it back and forth. So you're not creating any new stitches that are going to be seen from the right side of your work. You're simply adding more coverage. And you can do this as much as you like until you get the coverage. And I think that's about good. You can check it. See, isn't he cute? Oh, it's so cute. So, now we can tie off as we would regularly. Just go through that once, and then send your needle underneath so you can hide that tail. Now we can make his little eye, and there's a little bit of black in this braid to do just that. we're going to use the tiniest amount of this piece of floche to make, literally we're going to have 2 French knots, right, because we have this guy over here. So we're going to have 2 French knots in this whole motif, which is why I've thrown just a tiny bit of black into that braid. You can save the piece, oh I forgot to do a knot, save this piece of floche for your next duck. I mean, the black will just take you forever, right? You can just do so many little French knots for the amount of black that I've included. So we're gonna go like this. I do a French knot, I think, differently than a lot of people do. I hold my thread, I send my needle around, put my thread above my needle, and then that creates a loop. I go through that twice, put it down a few threads away from my fabric, and I pull tight. And that gives me a little French knot, a little eye. How cute is that? So that's all right there. Like I said, we've got one more to do. And then to tie this off, since I don't want to thread this, you know, in the yellow and have the black show, I am going to make a knot this way where I use my finger to pull the knot against the fabric. I might do this twice just for good measure. And then I'm going to trim these tails fairly close to the fabric. They're maybe a 1/4 inch away. That way I don't have the tails weaved in through the black, or sorry, weaved in through the yellow showing the black. You know, we want to keep it just a nice pretty yellow, not have the black in the mix. I'll cloudy it up. So like I said, I'm just going to keep this piece of floche over so we can do the next eyeball, keep it in with your braids so you can do the next ducks. And yeah, so I'm just going to repeat the same thing to this duck, and then the last thing we have to do is this little guy who's splashing over here. Afternoon nap time. Daisy's down for her second nap of the day, and we've got our 2 ducks done, and we are down to the last little guy who's splashing into the water. So I'm going to take the yellow that we've used for the other ducks, same yellow, and find my needle. This motif goes by fairly quickly, even with having, you know, if you've got little ones like I do. I've done this in a couple of hours over the course of the day of, you know, lunchtime and nap time, and this one needs that, and this one needs that one, and whatever. So it's fairly easy to get done. Shadow work embroidery, I feel like in general is it just goes by really quickly. You know, things like very intricate, you know, cut work, or bullions, or just like little itty bitty stuff that can kind of take a long time, but shadow work goes by pretty quick. So we are starting the bottom of this guy the same way that we started the other ducks, and we're just gonna go back and forth. If you can imagine our rectangle are these, you know, these 2 long sides is what we are going to be embroidering. It's kind of like a triangle, really, if you go up it, and then the 2 legs are going to be each their own little rectangle, but the whole body is more like a triangle. So when it comes to needles, I haven't touched on this video about needles. I'm a little bit unconventional when it comes to needles. I don't think that for the most part needles make a huge difference with hand embroidery. Now when you do bullions, they can make a huge difference. So there is a little, you know, with that exception, and obviously if you do silk ribbon embroidery, your needle needs to be bigger. That way you're able to actually get the silk ribbon into your needle. But with those 2 exceptions, or I guess if you do, you know, wool tapestry or whatever, but with the exception of your fiber being too big to get into the needle, or doing bullions, or I guess cast on roses too, The cast on stitch is a similar thing to the bullions, but what I'm trying to say is that normally I just pick whatever needle I can find. I'm not the best at having needles stored properly and like, oh, this size 8mm is right here, right where I need it. I'm like, here's my thing of needles. Well, it's currently with snaps too, and they're just like on the bottom in a hot mess, and I need to get better at it. One day maybe I will grow up and have a system for it, but I don't. I'm just being honest. I don't. So it's just whatever one I can find. Like I said, I'll be a little bit more picky if I'm doing bullions, because I know that if I find a really thin needle, then I'm going to have some thin bullions, which sometimes that's the look that you want, but sometimes you want something that's a little bit more plump. So bullions, it does make a difference with a bullion, but things like this where you're just doing straight stitches, I don't think it makes any difference what needle you use, as long as like I said, I like to use needles where the eye of the needle is the same sort of diameter as the shaft of the needle. Beyond that, whatever. And it makes it easier not stressing out over it. I mean, I will smock with these needles too. Like, I know a lot of people, I think they either use a Chanel or a Darner, whatever, or whatever that needle is. They don't use the millimers or the sharps that I use, but that's fine. It's sewing. You do you. There's no right or wrong. You do what works for you. You do what works for you. So, and now we can kind of turn that corner, maybe with 1 or 2 stitches, and then do this little foot. And I'm kind of seeing how I might have a little gap in coverage right about here that I need to go back and fill in, which is no big deal. Now I feel like I need to do something with this embroidery design. Like, I can't just have a scrap piece of fabric with a completed embroidery design. I should turn it into something, right? Again, when you're doing these small curves like this, you want to reduce your stitch length. That way you're able to go around the curves and have it be like a smooth, fluid curve instead of like chamfers, you know? And here, I feel like I have enough coverage, so I'm just going to be doing the backwards outline, backwards running stitch, to outline the rest of these little toes. No, they're not toes. They're little flippers, the little, what do you call them? The little web feet things. So, got both of the feet done. You've got about 50 strands of each of those yellows. So you can see how far that braid that will take you. You've got about 50 strands of each of the yellows and the 3 blues. And then you've got a little bit of the 2 oranges. You've got about 25 strands of each of those, and then as well as 25 strands of the white and black. I really should do a duck bullion motif. There's a really sweet one. And once again, I've got enough coverage on like the little tail feathers, so I'm just going to go do the backwards running stitch to complete the outline. So now we've got the 4 little splashes and we are all done. So to begin, I'm going to start like on one side of that oval and make a little stitch, and then I'm going to put my hand back behind this so I can hold the tail in the middle, so I'm stitching over the tail and then therefore hiding it. So I'm going to make my second stitch on the other like 180 degrees or so from that first stitch, and I'm going to go over. And then my next stitch I'm going to go over here on the top of the oval, come back, and then again I'm going to go to this top of the oval, and I'm just kind of going to work around the oval in this manner. I think I'm a little bit off my lines. I'm kind of looking at this at an angle instead of directly at it. Whenever I've been doing this for not a number of years, but you know, I've been doing YouTube videos for a little while now, and I cannot seem to get embroidery videos down. It's like whenever I do embroidery videos, the stitches do not look as nice as they do without a camera in the way. And I've improved my setup over the years, and the camera's not like, you know, on my lap anymore or anything, but still, like, I try to get it so that the fabric, it's, you know, is more in frame, and so then I can't see it as well, and it's just never as nice without the camera. So anyway, that's fine. Just don't judge my stitches too much is what I'm trying to say. So then we have one little splash, so easy enough. We'll go back behind. Go through once, go through twice, go through that loop once, and then of course hide that tail. I know I sound a little, you know, oh, hide the tail, but look how neat the underside of it is, you know? Like, you don't have all the straggly little bits, and you can see we've deliberately not hidden the tails underneath the white, underneath the yellow, so they show through the white, you know, because we don't want the black showing through except for the little eye. And you can see how those are like, you know, a little straggly. But if we would have had that with all the yellow and all of the blue, oh, it would definitely not be as neat. So I'm just gonna finish up the last 4 splashes here. I hope this video was kind of fun, sitting down and hanging out and doing some stitches, and you get to learn another motif. Like I said, the motif is on my website, and the floche braids are as well. So if you have any questions, put them down in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.